To the inaugural meeting of the Metro Arts Commission Audit and Finance Committee. I am the chair of this committee, Commissioner Jester, and we have Chair West as well on this committee. We are actively looking for one or two more members, but we are the committee at this point. And we also have with us today our interim executive director, Miss Ashley Batchelder, and from Metro Arts staff, the lady who keeps everything running for these meetings, Miss Vivian Fox. Thank you for being here today. As always, Metro Arts' mission is to drive an equitable and vibrant community through the arts, pursuant to the provisions of 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws. Please take notice that decisions of the Arts Commission may be appealed to the Chancery Court of Davidson County for review under a common law writ of certiorari. Any appeal must be filed within 60 days after entry of a final decision by the Commission. Any person or other entity considering an appeal should consult with an attorney to ensure that time and procedural requirements are met. Next, we will move on to public comment. Vivian, do we have any public comments today?
We do not have any public comments today.
Thank you.
And nothing has been submitted as well.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to our action and discussion items. I think today will be less than the allotted time, but we want to make sure and take all the time we need to fully discuss things. Given this is our inaugural meeting, we are sort of feeling our way out here, but I know we have some good information to cover. So we will go to the budget update first. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Batchelder.
Great. Thank you so much. So I put together some slides that will just go to the next slide and then the next one. Wanted to share a little bit about budget updates for the current fiscal year and the next fiscal year. And so I'll also say this meeting is informational, so we have no action items that we're going to take, but I know that there's been requests from the commission over the last several months and longer to have more sort of regular, easy to understand, easy to see, digest information about where we are in our budget, our budget planning, and of course, a lot of that is related to the financial processes and the recommendations in the audit. And so appreciate the chair establishing this commission, appreciate Commissioner Jester chairing this committee, establishing the committee, you know. And so I've prepared a few updates. What I want to share first is some really exciting news for the department. You all know that we've had some key vacancies in the department in Metro Arts for some time, with one of them being our finance administrator. And so I'm very excited to report that we have made a conditional offer to a candidate who has given us a conditional acceptance. And so we are moving through that process of bringing somebody on board for this very critical leadership position in the department that will add a lot of capacity to all areas of our work, but especially in our audit implementation plan, in our budget process, and provide a lot of support to the executive director, currently me, and then the future executive director as well. And so hopefully we will get to introduce this candidate at the next meeting in April, but I just wanted to share that because we'll really be able to flesh out and develop, I think, a lot of the information that we'll be able to bring to this committee in coming months with this person's expertise. And so that's great news. So I wanted to share that. So the other things that I have to share, a few words about our current budget. And so what I have provided you here in your packet is a budget accountability report. So this is a bar report. This is something that I just have to submit every month, and I just wanted to show, and I think part of my role is that I'm trying to narrate a lot of what goes into decisions and processes in the department. And so I think that's really important for you all as commissioners, as our governing board, as well as just really being transparent and explaining the processes and information that we have. And so We will sort of try out different formats of bringing financial information to you in coming months, but this is something that I just easily have accessible to me, and so I'm bringing it to you as an illustration of where our finances are right now. So every month I have to complete this report that essentially is me logging into the system and seeing what our numbers look like for the month. And if we are, if our system tells us that we are approaching close to being like at budget or going over budget, I have to provide a lot of information about what's going on. The great news is that we have not been over budget at all in several months. We are well in the green here, this being the most recent report. And you see we're actually quite under budget. A lot of that is due to the vacancies that we have on staff. But this is sort of a thing that I have to submit every month that I just wanted to bring and show you. And the second page shows a breakdown of our current year-to-date, or the annual budget and the year-to-date budget with the actuals and the variance there. And so I'm not going to go into this, but you can see sort of the breakdown between staffing costs and then some of those other expenses and how those totals look. So once we have our finance person onboarded and here, we can get a lot more feedback from you about what is most helpful. And I am not a finance expert myself, so I just wanted to bring you this with my main thing saying we're well in the green, we don't have anything to worry about, and I'll take questions if you have any, sort of glancing at it, but so I'll just pause for a moment. I don't know if this is something that maybe the commission has seen before. Commissioner West, if the format looks familiar to you.
This OMB budget accountability report, this is really helpful. So yeah, I have not seen this before. So this is really helpful. The monthly budget, this piece, I have seen this before. But it's not as, like you said, when the new finance person comes on, you can look at other ways. But this is super helpful with the visuals. And no, I've never seen that. So thank you.
I don't have any questions. Yeah, and I'll second that. The OMB sheet is something I've never seen before and is very helpful. So thank you for that. And thanks for managing your expenses well, even though I know a lot of the underage is just doing a lot of the work yourself at this point.
We'll start spending a little more once we get our vacancies filled. So that's primarily why we're so under budget in some of those areas. So that is that. Looking at my slide. So that puts me into talking about upcoming budget. So we are in April right now. I know you all know this, but the fiscal year budget for FY 25-26 by law must be passed by the end of June. On May the 1st is a Thursday. That is when the mayor will release his budget, if not earlier. That coincides with the state of Metro, which is on that Thursday, May the 1st at 10 a.m. at the downtown library. That's kind of when the budget is revealed. So that's when we will know what our starting point is for our budget for the next year. And then between May 1st to when the budget is passed in June, that is when the council has the opportunity to make any changes that they may wish to make via an amendment process. And so I prepared just sort of a brief overview of some of the things that we have requested in our budget, and just to sort of narrate this process for the benefit of new commissioners as well as anyone else. Things that we have to verify, give updates if needed as part of this budget process is confirming our organizational chart, confirming that the positions that we have are still the accurate positions that we are utilizing. That was especially important for us because we have these authorized vacancies, right? Making sure that our vacancies remain in our organization chart for the next year and that they remain in that authorized status. So even though we have vacancies right now, we're not at risk of losing them come the new fiscal year. And so we've confirmed that information, making sure that things like department contacts and our stated mission, our lines of business, making sure all of those things are accurate and up to date for the budget book that comes out as part of the mayor's budget. And so I've been working closely with our finance rep from the OMB office, and we continue to receive a lot of support from finance in helping us move through this process, especially when a lot of these dates and things were due really in the first 10 days of when I started this job. And so just want to, acknowledge that we are receiving a lot of support from our key partners in finance and OMB, and really appreciate the support that they've helped shepherd through this process, helped me. And so that kind of brings me to, I just want to highlight the things that we included in our budget modifications. And so budget modifications are our requests for things that we either want to expand or new things that we want to do in our request for this next upcoming budget. And I went through these briefly in my director's report in the March commission meeting that we had, but I thought that I would walk through them a little bit here. And so what you have in front of you is our section of what will be part of the budget book. And I'll just kind of go through, I'll tell you what's in here. The first page really looks at our staffing and our FTEs that we have. And what stands out the most from this, of course, is how much our department has grown. And so if we look at FY21, we had 7 staff members, Metro Arts, and we look at FY25 right now, and we've got 14 and a half positions. And so we are, we've received a lot of support to grow our department and grow the work that we do, and that's certainly been reflected in our staffing size. And of course, like I said, we do have some of those vacancies right now, but are making progress in filling those positions. And so that first page just shows the staffing and the associated budget with it. You can skip beyond page 2, page 3, and page 4, because if we go to the next slide, it's our first budget modification. The pages that I just suggested we flip through is just a summary of those. So this is the detailed budget modification. So these are things that we are requesting, again, that are new or expanded. This is above and beyond what we have right now as our starting point. And so the first budget modification is just, we've requested that we restore our targeted savings. And so this was across the board last year. Departments were asked to, is it 3%? Don't quote me on that number, but to make targeted savings in their budget. Every department was asked to do this last year. And so departments could request that savings back. And so that is what this first budget modification is. And there's not much more to say about it than that. It's just a general request for that savings back in our budget. If we go to the next page and the next slide, our second modification is about our grant budget. And so essentially this justifies the increase requests that we have for funding, both from organizations as well as from individuals. So both of our grant programs, and this requests a 25% increase in our grant budget. And you can see sort of the justification that comes with that I've provided. And so that's what our second modification is. I will note, in case it is confusing as to why the full number is there, it's our grants via the way that the budget ordinance was passed last year. Our grant funding is sitting in a separate account. And so this $4 million is requesting that it comes back into Metro Arts budget instead of it sitting in a separate account. We still have full access to the funding, even though it's in a separate account, but that's why it's 4 million instead of a much smaller number as the increase. If we go to the next page, our third budget modification was investment in arts programming for court-involved youth redesign and relaunch. So this is part of our restorative arts work that is led by our restorative arts and equity team members, which I'll just say we're planning to have more information brought to commission, hopefully probably at our May commission, because we haven't talked about this work a lot in our public meetings in the last year, with our focus being on other priorities, timeline priorities of the department. And so part of our request here is to support this work. And I also think it's a great opportunity for commissioners to be aware of this other work that we're doing. And so the request for this is funding and resources to relaunch, redesign, with identified community partners, our restorative work that we have planned in partnership that we would like to do with partners at the Juvenile Justice Center. And so this is work that Metro Arts has done before, and that we, our staff has some great ideas about redesigning the program. And so you see the information there about that. And then our fourth modification, our fourth request, is really resources and funding to support community engagement and communications. And so again, you can see the justification as is there. And I really included this because I believe that resources are important in a lot of the community work that we want to do. Coming out of the challenges that we have had of, recent times, really having resources to support staff to be out doing community events, to be supporting community partners with resources to do that. That can also serve as a way of showcasing the work that Metro Arts is helping facilitate, right? Really having a budget to help show the impact of our work and to do it in a way that is really reciprocative with our community partners and the organizations and the artists that we work with. And so that is what that budget modification request is. And so that is what we have requested above and beyond our baseline budget that we've been operating on this year. There's more details in there, and they've been shown on the slides as well. And so any questions about what we've requested before I go into the process of what to expect?
Not so much a question, just a clarification. On the communications, we went, because that has not been funded at all in the past. So we've been operating on a $0 budget for all comms and community engagement. So I just want to really support this and the need that we've had for a long time, and thank you for including it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. This is all good work, so thank you for that very much.
So just sort of what to expect. As I mentioned, the mayor's budget will be released on or before May 1st. The handout that you have here is the schedule for the department budget hearings, and you will see that I have scribbled out the Arts Commission and noted us on May 14th. I got an email when we were sitting here in our other meeting about us being rescheduled from May 22nd to May 14th, and so that is why that is shown as there. And so what happens at the department budget hearing is that myself, our finance person, if that position is filled, which should be by then, as well as traditionally the chair and potentially other commissioners based on availability and interest, appear before the council, and we will make our pitch about what we're asking for. We'll have information about what we would be able to do with these funds if appropriated through these modification requests, as well as answer questions from council members. And so I anticipate questions about what went on with the grants this year, some of the outcomes of that, some of our processes probably for making sure or doing everything that we can to not encounter the same challenges in the next cycle, and likely just asking other questions about our financial status and state of this year. And so that is May 14th. It's a Wednesday at 4:40, and I'll follow up with commissioners about that. I encourage any commissioners who are available to attend. I think it says a lot to council members who see active and engaged board and commission members. And so I'll follow up with more information about that. And then, of course, June the 3rd is the annual public hearing on the budget that is open to members of the public. Again, commissioners will be encouraged to attend that. And I know that there have been community members asking what they can do to support our budget requests as well. And so that's just sort of the process. So that is what I have to share about upcoming budget. And if there's no further questions or comments, I know you've both gone through a budget, at least one budget cycle before, if you have anything that you want to add or ask.
I don't. I just put 4:30 for Metro Arts at Metro Council on my calendar, so I'll be there for that. I feel like the longer I sit on the commission, the more clear the budget information is becoming. And so thank you for being an integral part of helping that become something that I should have been able to understand from the beginning, but wasn't able to because of lack of clear information and communication. So thank you for that very much. Any other questions or thoughts about the budget?
I do not. Thank you so much. This is so very clear, and it's exactly what we needed. Thank you.
I'm going to back up real quick and take a minute and a half before we move on to audit, just to explain for anybody watching what this committee is. I should have done this at the very beginning, but the first iteration of this committee was the Budget and Finance Committee, and it came out of everything that was going on a year and a half ago to help us begin to have a little oversight and move out of that tumultuous period. The director of finance at that point, the mayor's office, directed that we put together an ad hoc committee that would have oversight over moving out of that period and looking over the budget and some different aspects of what was going on with Metro Arts then. The mayor's office and the director of finance at a certain point sent us a letter that said they thought the mission of that first committee had been fulfilled. And so that ad hoc committee was well, I don't know what the word is here, not dismissed, but dissolved. But also in just an effort to make sure that we still have an incredible amount of open communication with the community about finance, and because there is an audit that needs to be, there was an audit that happened, and there are a lot of areas of that audit that need to be addressed. We wanted to have a committee put together that would watch over that as well. And so this new iteration is the Audit and Finance Committee. Our purpose here is to keep tabs on the audit and what's been done and moving that audit through completion so we can have a bunch of green on the audit instead of a whole bunch of red. And also, even after the audit has come to, after we've resolved the audit, to make sure that we're watching closely over the finances each year as we move forward. So for anybody watching, I just wanted you to know that this ad hoc committee is the second iteration, and we're here to keep the audit moving forward, the correction of the audit moving forward, and to keep our eyes on the finances. With that, we'll move to an audit update. Ashley?
Great. Thank you for that framing and grounding of why we're here. And so like I said, I do appreciate having this structure so that I can provide your reports every month about the status of the recommendations in the audit. And so I've put together slides here in lieu of providing an updated document for the implementation plan, which I'll speak to in a moment. But what I've got in the slides, and Vivian, thanks for moving through them for me, is a review of the recommendations. And I want to share some of the expectations around the implementation plan and the timeline that can be expected for them. And so if you go to the next slide, this is again just as a reminder, because I think it's been a little while since we've talked about the specifics of the audit and the time frame and what exactly was it looking at. And so just for a quick refresher, this was an audit of Metro Arts financial processes. So the audit looks at, it's very process focused, right? It's around policy, procedure, internal controls, and such. And so this looked at the period from July 1st, 2022 to February 29th of 2024. And the two objectives here, does Metro Arts have processes and internal controls in place to ensure operating grant and Thrive award applications and payments are properly recorded, processed, reviewed, scored, approved, and paid in a timely manner? And second, does Metro Arts have controls in place to ensure significant financial transactions are made in accordance with applicable financial policies and procedures? And so I wanted to also share that I know some commission members, including Chair Jester, have had recent conversations with the folks, with our partners in the internal audit department. And I had a meeting with them last week as well to make sure that with the transitions that have recently had, that we are doing our part for making sure that we're moving this forward and have shared understanding and expectations, so that when we go back before the audit committee at a future date, there's no surprises, right? And that we've been communicating throughout this process. And so all is good on that front. And as I go through the slides, it will help sort of explain some of those expectations around the work that we have to do here. And so if we go to the next slide, we have looked at April 30th of this month as I'll say a tentative deadline, but a deadline that I am planning to meet to provide an implementation plan. And so an implementation plan is looking at each of the recommendations. So there's 13 categories of recommendations that are lettered A through N, and looking at that recommendation, putting forward a corrective action plan. And so that is, we will take these 7 steps to fully address the given recommendation. We will name the persons responsible in the department, the commission, other key partners in Metro as appropriate, with a proposed completion date. So this April 30th deadline does not mean that we are going to have done everything by then, but is that we'll have the roadmap for how we are going to prioritize this work and what those tentative plans are that we will move through. And so, for example, a corrective action plan, the note I wrote for myself, there's a recommendation around the use of comp time for staff, right? So a corrective action plan could or should include, having a policy of what positions are eligible, what the process is for requesting comp time, what the process is for approving it, recording it, making sure that all staff are aware of that policy, and then making sure that we are doing some kind of oversight and checking of our timekeeping system, right? So that's just an example of a corrective action plan. It doesn't mean that I'm gonna have every policy written by April 3rd, but I've got that roadmap. And so the remainder of the slides, if we go to the next one, I have just sort of a slide for each of the 13 categories of what those recommendations are. And I've got very shorthand notes around if this is completed already, if it is in progress, or if it's to be completed, because that will help illustrate to you how I'm prioritizing these things as we're moving through them. So if we go to the next, so that's what I've prepared, and I'll just jump into it. And of course, stop me at any time if you have questions about any of these. So I start at recommendation B. Recommendation A is just basically that we'll have all of our policies documented. I don't have a slide for that one. That one's kind of, once we've done everything, I'll go back and see if we've done A. But recommendation B is really about our onboarding, orientation, sort of management of the commission related things. So new commissioners, making sure commissioners are getting the type of information that they need to feel prepared for your roles. This has an annual review of our bylaws and making sure that we're retaining all minutes and board packets. And so I labeled this one as in progress. We are working, as we mentioned in our earlier meeting, around a commission retreat. We've shared the legal manual that the Department of Law put together as part of the conciliation process that we've incorporated into our onboarding process for commissioners here. We are looking at our bylaws this summer. We'll go through that revision and update process. And Vivian and I have been working together on making sure that our board packets are all documented and filed in ways that are easy for everyone to have access to them that are needed. So I've labeled this one as in progress. If we go to the next slide, recommendations C and D, celebration are complete. And so this one was really about the use of the Goodson Inc. contract company for temporary staff. And so you probably recall in the audit some findings around sort of the improper use of having some of Metro Arts employees on as contract staff instead of civil service staff. And so this was more of one of those recommendations that could be, done and completed in a very discrete act or action, right? And so that contract was ended in July, I believe the date, so several months ago. And then, ensuring that civil service rules are followed for future hiring opportunities. We are doing all of that right now. I've spoken about our vacancies. We're, of course, working with HR through that process. And so we have the support that we need right here. And I've marked this one as, complete for the most part. If we go to the next slide, recommendation E. This one says utilize established temporary staffing contracts to hire temporary employees, ensuring that required documentation is maintained and followed. I put this as to be completed, not because we are trying to hire temporary staff right now, but because we will need to develop our policy, right? We'll need to make sure that we know how to do this if in the future we have a need to hire temporary staff, because there are, I believe it is 3 Metro contracts that Metro has around hiring temp staff. So this is to be completed, not because we have plans to do it, but so that we have our policies of how it's done.
I think E1 there is D3 here. And then E2 is E2. I'm not sure that's a terribly important thing, but E1 is ensure hours worked and overtime are necessary, reasonable, and properly documented. And then D3 is utilize established temporary staffing contracts to hire temporary employees.
Yeah, some of those were. So this document needs to be updated quite a bit.
I guess if things moved up when they were completed too, that makes sense.
And these are shorthand on the slides as well, where some of the recommendations around the temp agency that we've terminated our contract with were also about overtime and sort of were in multiple, right? But we'll make sure that they're aligned properly. And so, again, recommendation E is really just about making sure that we as a department understand the process and the policy if we have a need that arises for temporary staff. If we go to the next slide, recommendation F is establish and implement processes to ensure that all solicitation methodologies conform with the procurement code. I marked this as in progress and to be completed. I said it's in progress because we are getting the support that we need from procurement. This was in the context of grants, and so I think that this could relate to a lot of things in the department, but we frequently work with procurement, for example, in public art, which is not what this audit was about, but we have all of those relationships to know if we need to go through a procurement process that we will do it properly until we add our capacity via our finance person to really make sure that we have policies and procedures that are specific to our department, but in alignment with the Metro Procurement Code, and making sure that our staff are trained on them. A lot of the recommendations from the audit, we're making sure that all staff know the basics of some of these routine procedures that we have to go through, even if you're not necessarily needing to do something every day. And so making sure that all of our staff feel comfortable with knowing what the basic rules of procurement are, right? So that's what recommendation F is. If we go to recommendation G, this one is about grants. And so establish policies and procedures, ensuring that all grant applications are properly recorded, reviewed, tracked, processed, scored, and that award amounts are properly communicated to applicable stakeholders, ensuring that supporting documentation of application and award processes are retained, and ensuring that payments on grants are not made without a duly executed grant agreement. And so I've marked this as in progress because we are doing a lot of this work right now as we're moving through our current grant cycle and as we're setting up for the FY26 grant cycle, which, as you know, they're overlapping right now. And so as we are moving through these processes, we are documenting our process, which will become standard SOPs. The example for G3 here of ensuring that payments on grant awards are not made without a duly executed grant agreement. We've worked very closely with legal on developing a very thorough process for developing those contracts, for ensuring that invoices are matching grant contracts, and just a lot of internal control checks, control checks. The phrase is leaving my mind. And so we will have great documentation of this and making sure that all of our grant information is easy to follow. And this is a good example so the follow-up, and I don't have a date at which this will happen, but when Metro Arts has our follow-up audit, this is a good example that's been told to me of, they want to be able to pick up an SOP and take a sample of all the grants and move through the process and make sure that their outcomes match our outcomes, right? And so knowing we have a large volume of grants that we process, right? We have 165 grants this year. And so making sure that our processes are proper and that information is documented and accessible to those who need it. Recommendation F is quite similar. This is really H, recommendation H. I've also marked as in progress, and it's really mirroring the previous recommendation. It's just about Thrive. And so Thrive grants are properly recorded, reviewed, tracked, processed, et cetera. And the recommendation that's a little different here is number 3, which is ensure that funding decisions, especially for those denied, is properly documented and supported for all applications. We know that is what one of the challenges was in the last full grant cycle, of some of those reasons for denial being quite unclear. And so this is, again, making sure that we have all of that. And we have been and we will be providing updates to the grants committee on how both of these recommendations are coming together. And so you can that committee will be seeing this material as well. If we go to recommendation I, this one says establish and implement a process for monitoring operating grants and Thrive recipients to ensure that funding is spent in accordance with approved application and award documentation. I have called this one in progress and to be completed. Because of all the challenges of the current year, we are about to have our grants being distributed, hopefully in the coming days, with just really 2 months left in this grant cycle, right? And so the process that we set up for this year is going to be a bit of an anomaly compared to the next year, which will again be a shortened period, again, because of where we are in the calendar. And then the next cycle will hopefully be back on track for that full, as close to 12 months as possible. And so we will be thinking about different ways to, be checking in and monitoring those those grants and the work that is being supported by Metro Arts. And I think it's important to say that, we don't doubt that people are misusing their funds or their grants. We just haven't, as a department, had the most consistent ways of us telling the story of what we are funding, right? And so I think it's important to say is that we have lots of ways that we can be improving our processes at Metro Arts, right? And we're talking about some of those things like in community engagement sessions this week, for example, of like, how can we best be making sure that we're staying up with all the work that you're doing that's being supported by these grants, right? And so like, we know that the work is happening with the grants that we are administrating to organizations and to individuals, and this is all about making sure that we are able to document that work and tell that story, because we also want to be doing that as an agency, right?
Yeah, sure.
So the next recommendation is J. This one says, ensure that adequate documentation is retained related to how payments are made to payments are made to panelists are calculated. And then ensure that panelists complete a conflict of interest form before participating in scoring applications. So this is about our community members who participate in the grant review panels that we did the last week of February of this year. I've marked this as done and in progress. We worked with legal to make sure that we had an appropriate conflict of interest policy for our 17 community members that participated as panelists this year, and we collected those forms, and we went over that in training, which is all documented in the work that we did about 6 weeks ago. And I just said in progress for this one, really about the how payments are calculated for the next year, because we still have to develop our sort of method or our policy for determining payments in future cycles. But we've got down that process for panelists disclosing conflicts of interest in the training as well as in submittable. So that is recommendation J. Recommendation K is about compensatory time. So ensuring that employees who are eligible for comp time are documented internally based on the job description, creating a process for comp time to be requested, approved, accrued, reviewed, tracked, and monitored, and making sure that we are checking those balances in our appropriate systems. In R12 is the Metro system. And so I've marked this as in progress because I have received guidance from HR around exactly what of our employees are eligible for comp time. Right now, we do not have routine needs for comp time, and so this was a finding of the audit where we've made great improvement, and I've just marked it as to be completed as well, because again, once we bring on our finance administrator, that person will help make sure that our policies are clear and that people understand what applies to them, what doesn't, how you request that, approve it, etc. If we go to the next slide, we have recommendation L. And so this one, again, is about employee time. And so it's establish policies and procedures to ensure that all leave time is properly requested, approved, recorded, tracked, monitored, and reported. Discontinuing the use of executive director leave time, ensuring that this information is properly recorded in the R12 system, that we're following all civil service rules, and so forth. And so this one, again, is all three of those categories. Some of the very specific thing about discontinuing that category of leave time has been eliminated. We don't do that anymore. Some things are in progress, and some things, again, will be better fleshed out once we have our finance administrator on board. But one example that I can give in this category is that in December, former Director Coleman had implemented the use of a new leave request form. I have continued the use of that leave request form that was developed in consultation with finance. And so, that's in progress. We are using that, and things may become more defined or processes improved once we have our additional person sort of helping with policies and procedures. Recommendation N. Recommendation N, and then this is the second to last one, I will say all the recommendations that I just went through were all marked as urgent and high priority in the audit report. These final two are the level that's lower than that. So important, but not urgent. And so letter M recommends to perform a cost-benefit analysis related to the implementation of our grant management system. This is our submittable system that you've heard us reference submittable before. Some of you I know have experience when you've been previous applicants or used it in other settings. And this is about evaluating access levels for staff. And what this was referring to is that a lot of people had access to that system that didn't really need access to that system. And so I've marked this as complete because we've made sure that access levels are an appropriate level, but as to be completed because we've not done this recommended analysis if that is the best system for us. It is meeting our needs right now, our current grant needs right now, and any change to a system, it would be quite disruptive if we were to do that right now. And so I am not treating this one as urgent, and this was not flagged as an urgent one either in the audit. I believe this next slide is our last recommendation. This is letter N. Work with the council, finance, law, and other stakeholders to establish a framework where the categorization of Thrive conforms with the code, Nashville Code, resolutions, and intent of lawmakers. So this was really completed through the establishment of the working group of the conciliation agreement, which was the body that recommended the use of fiscal sponsorship, fiscal agency that was adopted by the commission in December, I believe, is when you adopted that. And so I've marked this as complete, and I've also marked it as in progress just because this is we'll improve this process, right, as we move through another grant cycle using this, here it's called a categorization, but essentially this was about finding that more compliant and sustainable method for administering Thrive Awards. And so if we go to the next slide, these are my thoughts and my recommendations to you of prioritization and target completion dates. So at the beginning, I said that April 30th is my expected completion date of when I'll complete our implementation plan. So for all those recommendations that I went through, it'll have that plan of these are the steps we need to take to address this, who will be involved. And my sort of proposal for what some of those target completion dates are is that the grants related recommendations, we can look at the end of this fiscal year for having those policies and procedures in place. For the commission-related ones, so that is our onboarding, our bylaws and such, looking at the end of summer. I might adjust that to say early fall, just to make sure that we meet that. For some of our personnel, payroll, I would include sort of procurement policies in here. I really pushed those out to fall and winter of the end of this calendar year and the start of 2026. Part of that is because I have just been not able to address all of these things without our finance position being filled. It's just not feasible until we get that position filled and the capacity that will be added there. One thing that I forgot to mention is that we will be migrating to using a different payroll or a different timekeeping system. We'll be moving to using Kronos. Many departments are moving, so we will be shifting away from our current timekeeping system. If you remember, the phrase honeybee base, and so we know that will not happen until the end of this calendar year. So some of these things are based on our capacity, and some of them are just based on plan transitions that are happening anyway. And so I believe that these sort of categories should encompass all of the recommendations that I just went through, and this is sort of my thoughts on sort of the prioritization. And none of this should be a surprise, right? And so I know that the commission, when you all asked me to do this role, the focus was grants, right? And so we've prioritized that here, of course, because of the grant cycle that we're in, and we also want to set up our next grant cycle in good process. And so that's sort of how I am prioritizing this. And looking at the time that took me most of this meeting to go through, this is my last slide, and so open to suggestions, questions, critiques. And I guess for our monthly meetings as we move forward, I'll be bringing some of those more fleshed out plans, and we might, look at an SOP, or, y'all as the governance board are here to make sure that the work that we are producing meets our requirements, right? Not to proofread the SOPs or anything, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to, number one, say thank you to Dr. Coleman for picking up this arduous task and running with it in the beginning, but thank you to you for continuing and for giving us a good overview of what's left to do and a time frame in which to do it. Thank you. It's been very clear, and I appreciate that. Do you think it would be good for us to have our next meeting mid-June so we can talk about what you have or want to have done by the end of June? Does that seem like a next good step for us, or is that yeah?
Yeah, I think that works because I'm anticipating, just thinking about commission calendars, like May is going to be a big focus on our grant guidelines approvals, and so just thinking about y'all's bandwidth as well. So I would be good with meeting 2 months from now.
Vivian, if you don't mind, I guess there's only 3 of us here, but if we could just keep that in mind so we can go over. Yeah, sounds good. And thank you. I have spoken with Bill. I know you have too, and he's been very patient in understanding that we have grants to get out the door. But this is not something we could let fall by the wayside, and you obviously have not. So thank you very much. Any other comments or thoughts about audit? Commissioner Westbrook?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Chair Jester said. Having this divided in prioritization and target completion, and also, I'm familiar with this, knowing how much work has gone into just you updating all of this and thinking through the policies, the procedures that internally and externally are audit driven, but also will help us with other aspects like Tennessee Arts Commission, things like that, that all these need to be worked through for various purposes and content. And I want to thank you so much for presenting it in this way, because it has really cleared me up in terms of taking everything that we had to where we are now. And I'd just like to offer up any assistance that you need, or an incoming our finance person. We're here to support, and anything you need, just let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair West. With that, we'll wrap up our audit update. I do not believe that we have any new business to discuss. And so if everyone is on board, I will call for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.